This week we're starting a new unit, and it is all focusing on objects of wealth and power in artworks or artworks themselves. And today we're going to look at artwork from the medieval period, and these are known as icon paintings. We're looking at about 500 to 1500 AD, and like I said, during this time they painted a lot of biblical figures and paintings of Christ. And they believe that these paintings actually held power when they were touched. So they might carry them into battle, or when they were sick, they might rub them. And so a lot of them actually have some deterioration, and you can see the color kind of wearing off because people would carry them everywhere with them. They were, pretty small, and they would just rub them for healing powers.
So you'll notice right away that these don't really look a whole lot like some of the art that we've studied so far. Especially when you compare to the classical art, of the Renaissance or ancient Greece and Rome. These just look a little bit less realistic, and it's easy to kind of poke fun at it, but there's a reason that they don't look exactly like real people. They were purposefully avoiding naturalism, so they were avoiding it looking realistic. Because artists at the time, they were just trying to further the role of God and provide that as a service to people by making these. Artists were not trying to make a name for themselves. So where Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci became household names, we don't know, all of the names of the people who have made icon paintings. They weren't after that. And so to make artwork that was super realistic and, looked just like a person standing in front of you would have been seen as though the artist is competing with God. So these are really more of just a symbol representing someone who's very easily recognizable. So you'll notice that often they're painted exactly the same. Mary's going to have certain clothing, certain colors like blue that's used in her cloak is going to help people to recognize her, especially in a time when not everybody necessarily knew how to read. So this being recognizable was more important than it being realistic.
And you talked about some characteristics that we see, obviously the proportions aren't correct. The eyes are usually a little bit large. You see these long, skinny noses, long, skinny fingers. Usually people laugh because baby Jesus looks like a miniature adult, whereas usually children have very different proportions from adults. Another thing that you're going to see a lot is some gilding done on, usually these were done on wood. And gilding is basically gold accents. And they would do this to represent kind of the dome of heaven or just divinity in general, gold obviously being associated with wealth, but also, yes, heaven. You would also see a lot these halos around, these different figures' heads to represent their divinity as well. And so they would usually paint these on small wooden panels, and they would use something called egg tempera, which is basically what we're using now for our paint, tempera, but it does have an egg yolk with the pigment, and it helps just kind of with the binding and things like that. So if you get tempera paint and wonder why it smells, it's probably gone bad because it has an egg base in it.
And it will smell like rotten eggs. So icon painting we often think of as something that's very, very old, from the Byzantine era, but this is actually a tradition that has continued all throughout art history and still to this day. There were time periods where these icons were seen as kind of sacrilegious. People for a while were wanting to destroy these, and this is called the iconoclasm. And simply because it was seen as unacceptable that you would have artworks depicting these biblical figures, that no artwork could possibly do them justice. And so people were concerned, are you really worshiping the person who is portrayed in this icon, or are you really just worshiping the object itself? And so throughout history, that's kind of gone back and forth. But it's still a tradition that many cultures all over the world still practice to this day.